StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. What is that? That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is when men do their best work. And when I say men, I am literally referring to males. But the ladies, as you're all listening to this, you can probably use some of this yourself, but this is directed towards the men. But before we get into any of that, let me remind you all of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week, respectively. Once we start sending those messages out again, you're going to want to be on the list. You don't want to be outside of the circle on this one. So send a text to the number 305-384-6894. And once we start sending those messages out again, you'll be getting those straight to your phone. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That's the place where you can get access to all of our trainings, such as 30 Days of Discipline, ASAP Confidence, Bulletproof Mindset, the Work on Your Game System, Business Builder Framework, and 30 plus other trainings, courses, and programs, all created by me, all based off the frameworks that I've created around personal and professional development. And you have the opportunity to be coached directly by me, and the university is the only place that I do any direct coaching. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can find out more. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which is when men do their best work. Now, this show is called Work on Your Game, after all. So we should talk about how we can best position ourselves to do the best work we need to do on our games. And then in this particular masterclass, I am speaking specifically to the males for a specific reason, which you will understand clearly as I get into my points. However, as I said, I don't have a problem with the women listening to this, as you may have a man in your life, whether it's a spouse, a friend, a child, a student, who would benefit from understanding this message, because this message is going to be tilted directly towards the male species for specific reasons. And you can also listen to the message yourself, and you can vet the message yourself before you give it to your child. Remembering that the Work on Your Game message is all about high-level performance done consistently with the aim of producing high-level results. That's the reason why we exist in the marketplace, and everything else that we do is under the umbrella of those three main objectives. And they're all means to the ends of helping you create those objectives. That is the reason that we do what we do. So let's get into how a man sets himself up to do his best possible work. First point, topic once again, is when men do their best work. First point is understanding the concept of transmutation. What is transmutation? It is defined as the action of changing or the state of being changed into another form. Transmutation simply means changing something into another form. First time I heard this word transmutation or transmute was when reading Napoleon Hill's classic book called Think and Grow Rich, which all of you should have read. If you have not read it, go get it today and read it. One of my favorite books by Napoleon Hill is called The Law of Success, which was basically Think and Grow Rich was inside of The Law of Success. And The Law of Success was actually a bigger book. He just took a piece out of it and then he called it Think and Grow Rich, and that's what became the book that really took off. But in this book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill describes how men specifically tend to hit their highest levels of performance when they learn to transmute one energy into another, and which energy matters. And this is the reason why it's specific to men. So the good thing about transmutation, folks, is that it can work with any form of energy. I'll get to the men part in a moment. And energy can change, and energy can be changed from any form into any other form. So let's remember the law of conservation of energy, or inform you if you didn't know. The law of conservation of energy, you should have learned this in science class in school. It states that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply moves from one object to another, and or the energy changes forms. That's the only thing that happens to energy. You cannot create or destroy energy. You can't make energy go away. You cannot make energy appear. It just moves around to different spaces and it changes forms. That's all it does. But the amount of energy that exists in the universe is finite. It is fixed. It does not go up. It does not go down. It just changes forms and it moves around. So some people may have the energy right now. Other people have the energy. Money is a form of energy. So some people have it at one point, and then maybe other people will have it at another point. Now, money is a little bit different in that the amounts of it can go down and go up. But energy, the amount of that does not change. The amount of energy in the universe is fixed and it will never change. All that happens is it moves around and it changes form. So which means any of you can acquire and up your level of energy at any given time. You did not create energy. What you did was you just pulled it from somewhere that maybe it wasn't. You pulled it from somewhere to have it within yourself where maybe 5 minutes ago you didn't have any energy. Has any of you had that situation before? You got some good news, all of a sudden your energy went up. You found yourself in a urgent situation, all of a sudden you got all this energy. You realize that you only had a little bit of time left to get something done, all of a sudden your energy went up. Or you listen to a song that you like and your energy boosted. Maybe you got around another person, they had a lot of energy, and some of their energy transferred over to you. All of us have experienced this before, but that energy did not just get created out of nowhere. It was already there somewhere. It just wasn't in you, and now it is in you. That's how energy works. So in a nutshell, any form of energy, sadness, anger, frustration, disappointment, happiness, excitement, joy, whatever, any form of energy can be used for positively productive purposes. Any form of energy can be used for productive purposes. It's just a matter of how we decide to transmute that energy and what that energy translates to within us. Because different people do different things when they feel different energies. Do we agree with this? Some people do certain things when they're angry that other people would never do when they're angry. Some people do certain things when they're happy that other people don't do when they're happy. Some people when they're happy, they want to bounce up and down off the walls and dance all around and make sure everybody knows about it. Other people when they're happy, they just sit calm and relax and take a deep breath and get into a meditative state. Neither is a right or wrong thing. Some people, when they're angry, they want to go break something, like physically hurt something. So either punch a hole in the wall. I've seen people do that when they were angry, or they'll go to the gym and get a workout in, or they'll vent verbally. There are different ways that people let that energy out, or they use that energy. Other people, when they get angry, maybe they channel it into some type of work-based activity, or they channel it into getting something done that they've been procrastinating on getting done, or they channel it into cussing somebody out who needs to be cussed out. We all use our energies in different ways, but understand that this transmutation is a law of the universe, and it works all the time. Okay, so your job is to figure out how to transmute any energy that you do have into whatever form makes the most sense for you in the moment. So with that thought in mind, let's move on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is when men do their best work. Now, what is here in point number 2, I'm going to make it clear why I'm talking specifically to men, because that first point could apply to any of you. And this is why I told the ladies who are listening to this that you should listen to this episode anyway. Here's where it gets specific to males. Men do their best work when we learn, this is the second point, when we learn how to transmute sexual energy into the energy of accomplishment and achievement energy. When we take our sexual drive, our sexual instincts, our instincts and drive to acquire and to have sex, and we transmute that energy into the drive for accomplishment and achievement. This is the point that Napoleon Hill stresses in his writings and his lectures, because his material was aimed at men. Now remember, Napoleon Hill wrote his books back 100 years ago or so. He wrote several books over the course of many years, but it was around about 100 years ago or so that he was writing these books. And back then, for the most part, men were the ones who went to work. Men were the ones who went to work. Women were, for the most part, at home. These days, there are still some women who are at home, and there are still families where the man does the work and the woman does not work, but there are also many women who are in the workforce these days. But when Napoleon Hill did his writing, for the most part, there were not a lot of women in the workforce. So all of his material was targeted towards men. And one of the things that he said in the book was that one of the strongest drives that men have is sexual drive. And this is 100% true. And any man listening to this can verify. Sexual drive is a very strong drive within men, because men, we have testosterone. All right, we have testicles. Those testicles and the testosterone within drive us to achieve, conquer, to win, to compete, to defeat enemies. And we do all of this. One of the reasons that we do this, whether we want to admit it or not, is to show ourselves to be the dominant male, at least in our space and our environment, which does what? It impresses the female sex, which opens us up to the possibility of sexual engagement. That's the reason why men do things. So ladies, in case you didn't know, and men, in case you were not wondering or not aware, most of the things that men do for achievement, accomplishment, performance, etc., is to impress the female sex, which opens us up to the possibility of actually having sex. All right, this is one of the internal male drives. And this is why when you hear, or when you see, or maybe even some of you have said, you talk about a man and say this man has no balls, or you may call a man a pussy, which is a form of saying that basically instead of having a penis and testicles, he actually has a vagina. That's a way of us saying, and women say this sometimes too, that's a way of us saying about that man in a derogatory way that he doesn't have the natural internal drive that most men have as a result of having testosterone. So we say clearly, because this guy is not trying to win, dominate, compete, be direct, defeat his opponents and impress the female sex, whether doing so intentionally or unconsciously, This man obviously must not have any balls, so he probably has a vagina instead. That's what we mean. That's what we're saying. We're not saying it in so many words. But that's what we're saying whenever we say a man has no balls, or we call him some other word that is related to being more of a female than being a male. Some of you may see that as toxic masculinity. Good. You should see it as toxic masculinity. I don't consider it toxic. I consider it just basic masculinity. This is the way that men think, whether you say it out loud or not. I'm saying it out loud for you in case you don't want to. This is what men do. Okay. Heterosexual men, at least. Let me say that. Heterosexual men are driven by this biological desire to win, compete, and dominate, and to show off for the women. We want to show off and beat all the other men, so all the men know that we're better than them, which puts us in position to have our pick of which females that we want. This is biological. You read Jordan Peterson, who many of you may know of. He's a very well-known philosopher. You read his book, 12 Rules for Life, and he has a couple others. But in that book, 12 Rules for Life, the very first chapter of the book, he goes into a very deep philosophical explanation, and then he brings it back to a everyday explanation of why men have this drive for success. And his work is, for the most part, targeted towards males. So what happens, being that all men are driven by this biological desire for sexual conquest, which starts with conquest over all the other males so that you don't have competition for the females. That's where this all comes from, in case any of you didn't know. The reason why men compete in sports is so that the man can stand up there with the belt as the champion and say, I'm better than all the other men here, which means when the women come and choose which man she is going to mate with, she's, of course, all of them are going to be lining up to pick from the guy who's at the top of the totem pole, which is the guy who's the champion, the man who has defeated all other men. This is why men participate in sports. This is why men compete physically, so that, again, we can prove we're better than all the other men, so all the men know it, and they all fall in line behind us, so we have first pick of the female. So this biological desire, around the age of 40, Napoleon Hill theorizes, men tend to stop taking this sex drive energy and using it specifically for accumulating sexual experiences. They take, basically, let's say it's a pie of 100%. We take all of the internal testosterone-driven drive that men have, if you will, and let's say as a big percentage of it is driven towards sexual conquest, because, I mean, we're men, we're males, we are biologically designed to do this. We take a good amount of that energy, and instead of putting it towards sexual conquest as much, what we do is instead we redirect some of that energy. We transmute that energy. Instead of looking for sex, now we look for career and professional accomplishments around the age of 40, because this is around the time when men's brains reach maturity. And it's said that women's brains reach maturity a lot sooner than men's brains, which can explain for some people why you see an older man dating a younger woman, and the man is older in years than the woman is in years, but the maturity levels may be very equal because women tend to mature faster. Science says this. And what happens is around the age of 40, when men do finally mature, again, this is just an average, some earlier, some later, but around that age of 40, men stop focusing so much on sexual desire. It's not that they stop completely. They stop focusing so much on it and instead start focusing on career accomplishment. And this is why it makes perfect sense that statistically men tend to hit their financial stride somewhere between the ages of 45 and 55. In other words, men's highest years of earning career-wise and professionally is between the ages of 45 and 55. At least they get to their peak at that age, and maybe they can stay there longer, but they usually get to their peak around that point. The reason is this is when men finally take the things that they've learned, the years they've accumulated in their careers, plus the maturity of now focusing on career instead of so much diverting so much energy towards sex and women, and now they start achieving at an even higher level. And again, let me be clear, it's not that men stop wanting sex when they become 40. It's that they no longer have that as their main energetic priority, as it tends to be when you're 25. Right? So any of you ever heard the saying, young, dumb, and full of cum? All right, that's a man before he hits his mental maturity, because that's all he's focusing on is how can I get the next woman or the next sexual engagement. I talked about this in a very early episode of the show where I talked about how to get focused and stop chasing ass. That was episode number, let me see if I can find that episode. That was episode number 103, how to stop chasing ass and find your focus, which is harder for a man to do when you're 27 or 32. But this is the reason why I made an episode out of it, so I could maybe help some men who are ready to get to that position even earlier than when your brain was ready to do so. So in that episode, I was explaining how to stop chasing ass and get yourself focused in life and focus on things other than sexual conquest, but instead focus on your career and your accomplishments. And that was especially because I had a lot of athletes in my audience. And for athletes, our career shelf lives are on a much earlier, the track is shifted up much earlier in the sports world, because in sports, you're pretty much done by the age of 40. Whereas in every other career, damn near every other career, you are basically just hitting your stride around the age of 40. So it's a completely different thing with athletes. But then once you get all this stuff out of your system, all right, so this chasing ass thing, I told young men in that episode, by the way, partake in as much of it as you wish in your younger years, whatever those years are for you. But once you have it out of your system, you're ready to settle down and get focused on your career. Now you can buckle down and you're not looking around wondering what if, because you participated as much as you needed to back then. Now you can focus on performance and producing results in your career and in your profession. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is when men do their best work. Number 3. What I shared in point number 2 leads right to this point here of number 3. Notice that men in leadership positions, any of you who works in these spaces where you deal with one of these men, or if you happen to be one of them, men in leadership positions such as coaches, let's say sports coaches, political leaders, a mayor, a governor, someone in national politics, church leaders like a deacon or a pastor, a rabbi, business leaders, CEOs, presidents, CFOs. Notice that many of these men, not always, but many of them are often married. You notice this? Look around. Think about the company that you work for. Notice that any men who are in those top positions, those C-suite positions, most of the time, those men are married. Now, why is this? Why am I making this point, and how is it connected to what I'm talking about here today? And is this an intentional thing? Yes, this is intentional, and I'm going to tell you why I'm making this point. Because the men who built these institutions, and all these institutions that I'm referring to, were built by men, and they are, for the most part, maintained by men. They may be manned by women in certain roles, but those positions were built by men. No one can deny this. The men who built these institutions understood themselves, because since it was built by men, the men understood their own inherent weaknesses. And they understood that a single man, for the most part, generally cannot be trusted with a high position of power and influence, because men are still men. In other words, you put a man in a high position of power and influence, especially a very visible one, and it's just natural that they may abuse that power with what still remains. There's still plenty of it, of their drive for sex. They can be 50 years old, still have a drive for sex. Again, I told you, they reach maturity around the age 40. Doesn't mean men stop wanting sex. All right, any of you over the age of 40, or it's not like you stop wanting sex when you turn 40. It's just that men understand, and if you put a man in a position of power and visibility, and he doesn't have that stability, that sexual stability and maturity that comes with being in a committed relationship, he will be running around abusing that power, and we don't want that person in a position of power. The exception to this, again, is the sports world, where an athlete can be 27 years old, very visible, and in a position of power, and it is known for their financial status, and everybody knows who they are, and they have not yet hit maturity. This is the reason why you see a lot of athletes doing a lot of really dumb things when it comes to their sexual engagements. Baby moms, multiple kids by multiple women, unmarried, rape allegations that happen with a lot of men, just doing stupid things sexually because they're not mature enough to do smart things sexually. So again, the sports world is an exception to what I'm explaining here. I'm talking about the professional world outside of sports, which is the world that most of you live in. And in most of these spaces, you don't put men in top positions if they are not married. You don't see most of the time, you've never seen a single man running for the president of the United States. Notice that they're always married. Even the vice presidents married. You don't see single men getting promoted to CEOs of companies most of the time. There may be some, but most of the time, the CEOs are not single men. You don't see single men heading up churches or any type of religious organization. Even in the sports world, there are exceptions again. But high-level male coaches at the collegiate and professional level, often they are married. Not all of them, but often they are married. So if you never thought about this, look around and you'll start noticing it. And people may not even have this, not like people have this written down, like, hey, we're going to hire a CEO, he has to be a married man. They don't say that. It's just that people are looking for it. And if you're vying for that position, it's almost like an unspoken rule. You better have a wife if you're going to try to come and be the CEO here, or you're going to be our head coach, or you're going to be a head of this church, because you can't be a single man with all this power and all this visibility. You're not going to do your job because you'll be running around taking advantage of the fact that you have this position and this status. So we need you to be married, so we know you got some stability at home. You can control that other brain, not the one between your ears, but that other brain. It is controlled by the fact you're in a committed relationship. And now we know you're going to do the job that we're hiring you to do, because we're not hiring you to run around chasing your sexual desires. This is an unspoken rule. And again, look around in organizations you've been a part of or that you are a part of. Notice that a lot of the top men in top positions are often married. This is the reason why. It's unspoken, but it's understood. So let's recap today's class, which is when men do their best work. So since the show is called Work on Your Game, we should talk about how men get set up to do their best work. Let me explain it. Number one, understand the concept of transmutation. It is the action of changing or the state of being changed into another form. And transmutation is all about taking energy from one place. Remember, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just moves around. So the amount of energy in the universe is finite. It does not go up, does not go down. It's just a matter of which energy do you have access to and how do you use it. So when you understand transmutation, then you understand that you can take any energy, because it's always available, and you can turn it into whatever energy you want it to be, and then you can use it for productive purposes, which leads to point number two. When men learn to transmute their sexual energy into accomplishment and achievement energy, this is when they tend to start taking off and doing their best work. This is the reason why it is, first of all, it is known biologically that men tend to reach mental maturity around the age of 40. And this is the reason why many men tend to reach their peak, their financial and career professional peak, around the ages of 45 and 55, because they've hit their mental maturity, combine that with the experience they have in their careers, and that's when things start to take off for them. Now, how long it lasts is another story, but they tend to get there around the ages of, between the ages of 45 and 55, because that's when everything comes together at once, including that control over their sexual desires, and now it's focused on something more productive. Number three, what I shared in point number two leads to point number three, that a lot of times you see men in leadership positions, they are often married. CEOs, coaches, political leaders, business leaders, religious leaders, they're often married because there's an unspoken understanding. It's almost subconscious that people understand this. You cannot put a man in a position of power when he is single, because he is too visible, has too much status, and he will do what a man does, which is take advantage of that visibility and status and power and utilize it for his sexual desires, when he's not being brought into that position to be a sexual conqueror. He's brought into that position to get some work done. And this is the reason why married men are often chosen for these positions. So if you plan on getting into one of these positions, you need to get yourself a wife, man, out there, because they're not even going to take you seriously walking in there saying, I want to be the CEO as a single man. You want to be the head of a church as a single man. You want to be a head coach as a single man, because the power is too easy to abuse. And they don't want to risk their investment in you with you getting into a scandal because you're running around getting ass instead of doing your job. And unless they're hiring you to be the head of a porn company, then that ain't your job. You understand what I'm saying here? All right, with all that said, folks, make sure you text me so you're in my community. My number is down below in the description. Also, Work on Your Game University, men and women. You want to be a high level performer. You want to get to the top of your job. You want to be a leader in the position in the job that you're in. You want to step into a leadership position and do your best work. And you want to make sure you have the right mindset, the right strategy and game plan, the right system, and be held accountable to implement. Remember our goals: performance, consistency, and results. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all